Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing the film Juror number 2. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for this film.
While serving as a juror in a high-profile murder trial, a family man finds himself struggling with a serious moral dilemma, one he could use to sway the jury verdict and potentially convict or free the wrong killer.
Dun dun dun!
Wow, intrigue and drama.
Yes.
What will he do?
What will he do? Okay, well, let's start off with our one-sentence summaries for Juror number 2. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, don't grieve and drive.
Nicely played.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah, not a good combination. My one-sentence summary is, always say the wildly inappropriate things during jury selection.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yeah.
Just come right out.
Yep. Civic duty, that's a whole thing. It's a lot of work. We probably should do that, but alas, maybe some of us shouldn't, as we learned from this movie. Okay, well, let's dive right in with our high-level thoughts about Juror number 2. We're not going to spoil this movie, and this is definitely a movie that is worth going in with a blank canvas for. So, Sarah, I'm curious your thoughts about this movie. This is one that we were both excited about, and I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I know you have as well. So I'm curious if this landed for you or not.
Yeah, I had heard a lot of good things about this, so that's why we were both really excited to watch it. And I really struggled with this film. I think that it does a lot of really good things, and I like that it shines a light on our criminal legal system and some of the areas where it's very imperfect and very human and could use some improvement, and I thought that was really good. But I really had a hard time watching this film and connecting, especially with our main character. I really struggled to get through this, and it might be a classic case of me just focusing on the wrong things, which I am prone to do. But so I wrote in my notes as I was reflecting on this film and trying to organize my thoughts for this conversation. I wrote down, I liked this as an intellectual exercise, but I didn't like it as a movie. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I like what this film made me think about, but it's not one that I had a good time watching. And I think that there are some versions of this movie that I would have preferred to have watched instead. So I don't know. I'm a little mixed on this one. What about you? What did you think of Juror number 2?
This might be a rewrite episode.
Yes, I love those.
Oh man, I think my thoughts about this film can be summarized by great premise, poor execution.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting premise. Just learning about this movie and kind of just hearing the rave reviews about it, I was so excited for this experience. I love films that explore these really complex moral dilemmas, especially ones that are ambiguous and difficult and play with kind of your civic duty for the collective and your moral responsibilities, but also these complicated dynamics with kind of your responsibilities that you feel or are emotionally tied with your family and wanting to provide for them. I love that kind of stuff, and seeing different people react in different environments and what is the thing that gets them to lean one way or another, I find just so interesting. So this could have been a really fascinating character study. It also could have been a really fascinating exploration of group dynamics and groupthink. And I don't know, this film feels like a really oversimplified and glossy version of what I wanted from this premise. I wanted the gritty, deep character study of this movie that's kind of dark and sinister, and there's all these different players with different agendas that all kind of collide and slowly gets uncovered. And I think the film does that. It's just a very glossy stylized Hollywood glitz version. And so I wanted this film to dig a little deeper, go a little darker, explore the depths of like the human experience a little bit more, both like as an individual making a hard moral decision and in the context of like group dynamics. I think it's all there. The ingredients are there. I just didn't think that the film did it. I think also, side note, is just like the lighting and the visuals of this film didn't really work for me either. Like I think a lot of the way that this was shot felt wrong for this movie and kind of the mood. There's a lot of like bright light and like very exposed imagery with high exposure, and I don't know, that's not what I would have expected from this movie. So on the whole, I think this was a fascinating premise, so interesting. Love to see someone else come at this and do a remake of it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talked about the visuals. I had to adjust the settings on my TV because the like whatever mode that it was in made Nicholas Holt's like cheeks just red the entire time. And then there was like a spot on his face that was kind of like yellowy at times. And it was just so weird because it was so bright. Yeah. So I had to definitely like switch the settings on my TV to be like, okay, how can I make it so that you look like a person and not like a weird, like overly bright, colorful thing. It was an odd experience. I don't think I've ever had to do that before while watching a movie. So that's just funny.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I kept thinking about while watching this is we recently recorded our top 10 movies watched in 2024. Yes. And you had mentioned, what did you call it? The melodramatic
manipulation.
Yes, melodramatic manipulation. Yes. And I would like to enter this into that journal.
I love that.
Because the whole time, I did not trust our protagonist. Yep. Because the film wanted me to root for him. It wanted so hard for me to like this guy. And I could feel the film trying to manipulate me. And I went, nope. I'm not going to do that. So it was so funny. While I'm watching this film, I am very aware of the fact that the film is like, yes, he's a good guy. He's a nice guy. And he is. He's made some mistakes. He's walking the path of redemption, all of those things. But it wanted me to like him so badly. Yeah. And my instinct is, nope. Yeah. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in the opposite direction that you want me to. Mm-hmm. So it's just really funny to watch this movie and understand that what it was trying to make me do, I was doing the opposite because that's who I am as a person. So this movie worked for a lot of people, but there's a lot of it that just didn't work for me. And it might just be my weird personality, but woo, I struggled.
Well, I was thinking a lot about that throughout this film because this worked for so many people. It got rave reviews, which is why I was so excited about it, because we've seen a gajillion legal dramas in Hollywood and in cinema at this point, and to do one well is a hard task, you know? And so knowing that this was a legal drama and that it was getting all this rave reviews, I was so excited for it because I love it. You know, I think we just reviewed did our top 10 list, and Anatomy of a Fall is like an impeccable legal drama. And I wanted more of that. You know, I love the way that the legal stage is such an environment for so much of like human dynamics to come out and kind of the narratives that are created, sometimes intentionally so, and also the different like unexpected and unpredictable ways people react in such a pressurized environment is so interesting for uncovering the different tendencies we have as human beings. And so I was so excited and you throw a premise on this like this with all of the moral gray area that I think would have been really interesting to paint a little bit more gray in this film. I think would have been so interesting to explore. So I was very hopeful for this movie, seeing all the great reviews. So I was like, clearly I'm missing something, and now it's confirmed clearly you are also missing something as well. So here we are. we are the problem.
I feel so much better. Like after this movie ended, I felt like the Will Ferrell gif from Zoolander, where he's like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, that's a little how I felt after this. And I love legal dramas. Like, in my heart, I am a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I did not go to law school, but in my heart, I am. So anytime I can watch a good legal drama, I'm here.
Tickles that, yeah.
They were both like doing their case, the prosecutor and the defense. I was talking back at him. I was like, nope, you should do this instead. What is this? I was poking holes in the prosecution's case. Like, I was on it. I was ready to be this man's defense lawyer. I was having a great time during all of that. But some of the other stuff, I was like, oh,
yeah,
the courtroom stuff
so bad.
Was not the main point of this film. I see. Okay.
Yeah, but it was comically bad.
It was so bad.
It was terrible.
It was just a weak case, man. Like, I don't know. I know that they didn't show everything, but I was like, man, as a non-lawyer, I think I could beat this prosecutor. Like, that's pretty bad. If I could beat you at your job. And this is the case that your entire career hangs on. Like,
yeah.
This is what we're doing?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And Toni Collette never. She is sharp as
would
nails.
Never.
She would never.
She's great.
So, yeah. And, well, let's give some spoiler alerts maybe so we can dive fully in.
Smart.
So, if you haven't seen Juror number 2 yet, this is your spoiler alert. We're going to dive right into all of the details. And we recommend watching this movie before listening to the rest of our conversation. So, I think it was a really smart choice for the film to have kept the time in the courtroom shorter and have spent more time with the jury in the deliberation process. I actually think they should have spent even more time in that jury room because that's where we get to really see the kind of the moral dilemma and also the kind of tough position that our protagonist is in to have to navigate the social dynamics and try and sway the group towards acquitting the defendant, but also not make it too obvious and not put the target on his back. I think that like interplay would have been really exciting to see some of that tension, and I think would have made those scenes even stronger is having the rest of the jury members, each of them from a character perspective, been written with more detail, more nuance. I think they were like pretty broad oversimplifications of kind of these different archetypal types of characters. And I think that doesn't do this movie justice. And I think it would have made for some really great social dynamics that we could have explored amongst the jury deliberation room, because I think that was really fascinating to see.
Oh, yes. That was so good. I agree. I think if we had had more time there, I almost wonder, and this might be a terrible idea, but if we didn't know that...
Yes. Yes.
That's my favorite, is when I don't even need to finish my sentence and you already know where I'm going. Oh, it's the best. Yeah, I totally forgot the dude's name. If we didn't know that Justin had committed the crime, and we saw him being like shifty and shady and just kind of like watching him react to things, and over the course of the movie we would put it together like, oh man, did he actually do the crime? Like, wow, how did that happen? And there's probably a way that to unpack that in a way that makes sense. But I think that would have been so thrilling, because then there would be a little bit of a mystery going on that would keep us engaged. Whereas, at least for me with this, I was most concerned about the dude who was on trial. I was more concerned about him than I was about Justin. And again, I was probably just focused on all the wrong things watching this film, but I was concerned about the dude on trial and wanting him to be acquitted. That was my main concern. And so anytime we were focused on Justin and his moral dilemma, I was like, I'm not invested in you. I think having something else in here, I think there's a way you can probably do this moral dilemma and make this kind of a tense mystery puzzle situation all in one. I don't know, just have a little
Yeah.
air of mystery in there rather than it just being a straight morality play.
Yeah. I think I broke my rule for myself, which is I watched the trailer for this mostly because I was trying to get my family to watch it with me.
Oh,
And
nice.
they give away so much of that tension in the trailer, you know? And I think had that information been withheld and had it become crystallized over the course of the first act of the film, that would have been really fun. And then we are continuing to stay in that jury deliberation room, but now we've put it together and we are now seeing every movement of his differently. And I think that would have been really fun. Like, it's a big moment in detail that we get to like wonder about and become suspicious about and then finally confirm. And now we get to see a new dimension of our character as he's navigating these really complicated dynamics. And I would have loved to see like maybe a darker, more cynical version of this movie, which is like getting to see this really good guy that like made an honest mistake, was in the wrong place in the wrong time, unfortunate circumstances, but out of the desire to protect his family, just like the lengths he's willing to go to clear his name and ensure that he is distancing himself from being a target in this case would have been really fascinating because we get to see some of his little tendencies to do that when he, you know, accidentally drops the papers or drops the coins. And clearly that moral conscience is battling within him throughout those sequences. But I almost wanted this to be a much more cynical view of the best of us, arguably, quote unquote, that descend into kind of this really twisted moral area. And then for our other protagonist, Toni Collette's character, I think she starts out as like this more calculated politician, but to see her rise and her being the counter to his dissent and kind of really dedicating herself to justice by the end would have been a fascinating like opposite trajectory for these two characters. So the person that we thought was the worst and the corrupt politician, you know, ultimately choosing better, being contrasted with this really good regular guy who's a family man descending into chaos, I think would have been really much more fun and interesting. But that's a different version of this movie.
That is a different version. And I wanted that version. And it almost seemed like the film was trying to do that, maybe. But then it doesn't fully commit. The other version of this movie that I was kind of playing with in my head, which is a little more of a traditional legal drama, is to focus on Toni Collette's character and see this whole thing through her eyes. And so she lays out her case, she gets this evidence, she starts investigating on her own, and then we have her big moral dilemma because for a prosecutor to step out and say, hey, actually, we got this conviction wrong, that is huge. Like that does not happen. And so, I mean, she would be risking her career and all of these things that she had worked so hard for. She got this thing that she wanted, that she had been working for. And is she going to give it all up for justice? Like, I think that also could have been interesting, even though that would be a much more traditional plot line. I think it could take this same story and accomplish a lot of the similar things. And I don't know, I may have found that version a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. And I think the ending does a really great job of like teeing up that whole thought train for us. I actually really liked this ending a lot. I'm curious your thoughts on how the ending landed for you. I appreciate it. I think it left enough to wonder about, but also enough for us to chew on of like, what choices do these characters make? But then also like, what is the right choice in this scenario? It's just like a fascinating set of questions that the film leaves us with. I think the journey that we get there is a little bit more rocky, but I like the way that the film chooses to end. And I was reading afterwards that they filmed a bunch of different alternate versions of this where they had, you know, police cars behind Toni Collette on the sidewalk, on the street. They had another version where there's policemen next to her as the door opens. And I like that they went with this version that's more ambiguous. She's alone. The conversation could go to a million different ways, but what do we choose to believe about who these characters are based on what we've seen is really interesting. How did the ending land with you?
I was caught up in how much time had passed? Was she there? Like, did she have enough time to, and I mean, I am not a lawyer, so I don't know how all of this works, but like, you have to like impanel a grand jury to get an indictment. Like, all of these things take time, and you already got a conviction for this case. So then how are you going to have time to like do all of this, to go after him? So like, I was caught up in mechanics and like lost in the timeline of everything. And I was like, I don't know how much time has passed when she ends up alone. And why would you, it didn't make sense to me. But it's fine. By this point, I was like, oh, the movie's over. Okay, great. I'm fine with this. My other thought for an alternate ending that I came up with is end it somehow in the jury deliberation. So we don't ever know really what happened to the defendant. So it could be like them casting all of their votes in the jury room, and they're about to like read it all, or like Justin like turns in his vote, and like that's where it ends. And so we don't know what happens, and we can come up with in our minds, did he do the right thing? Did he do the wrong thing? What is the right thing? What is the wrong thing? And like really highlighting that morality stuff, as opposed to, I hate that he voted guilty for this dude.
Yeah.
Like, that made me so mad
Right?
at him. And I'm like, I want you to go to jail. You did the crime. You should go to jail. And so I almost wish that the movie had ended earlier. If this really is this, like, what is the right thing to do, and you want an ambiguous ending, I think I would have preferred an earlier cutoff. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Well, he really, the movie views him so unfavorably by the end of this film. Like, I would have loved to see in this film about moral dilemmas, which is very interesting, some more waffling from him, you know, and his wife as well.
Yeah.
like I think there's some really great moments in the beginning half of the film, the first half, where you see the, like, it's eating him up inside. And I'm like, yes, this is a tough situation for you. It's hard. It's a lot to be processing right now. And he's holding it together. But by the back half of the film, and especially the last 15 minutes, he's so cool, calm, and collected, especially when he's in that conversation as well with Toni Collette's character, and they're kind of having this very highly subtext conversation about, like, he knows that she knows, and she knows that he knows, and they're talking about, like, what is justice, that whole conversation. He's very resolute in his stance and his kind of processing of the morality of this, and landing squarely in the decision that he's made. And I think that I don't buy that. If he's supposed to be this good guy, this family man, this regular guy that just was in the wrong place at the wrong time and found himself in these unfortunate situation, I would just love to see, like, more tension, more back and forth, more he almost decides to turn himself in and then chooses not to because there's this emotional tie, or his wife calls him really needing him. Like, there's just, I think, more actual human dynamics that would have played into his choices, other than just his wife was like, yeah, I need you and you got to be here for me. And then he quickly comes to that choice as well himself that just feels a little bit too fast. So I think that also paints him in quite a negative light by the end of the movie.
Yeah. I think more of that wrestling would have been helpful. I think especially, I don't know, if I was trying to put myself in his shoes, and I kept thinking about, like, I couldn't live with the guilt, knowing that not only did I hit someone with my car and they died, but I am responsible for sending an innocent person to jail
Life in prison
for that murder that they didn't commit.
Yeah.
That guilt would destroy me from the inside out. And I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And so I struggled to understand how he was okay with that.
Yes.
In the end.
Yes.
Like, I get it. You love your wife. You love your daughter. That's great. Those are good things. But like, I need a little bit more than that, especially because he seems real messed up by this case at first. And when he first has the realization, he throws up in the bathroom. Like,
the correct response.
Yeah, that is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, maybe it would have been better to see this almost like hardening and like desensitization throughout the film, and that would be a much bleaker version of the story where he has to harden himself because that's the only way he can survive this guilt. I don't think that would even work, but at least he's going to try. And that would be something interesting to explore. But it felt so unrealistic to me that he ends up where he ends up.
Yes. One of the endings that I think I would have bought a lot more is if he convinces himself, though he knows the truth, but he convinces himself that his narrative of it just being a coincidence or the delusion, like him buying into his own delusion out of survival would have been great. You know, that he's hardening himself, he's desensitizing himself, and him and his wife have convinced themselves, not 100%, they know the truth, but like out of the just clearing their conscience, they need to just somehow convince themselves into an utter state of delusion that, yeah, like if we weren't there, but you know, like it was, I think I really hit a deer. And so then I think it was a wrong character choice for him to show up to the sentencing of the defendant and showing up to Kendall's grave. I think all of that was like not the right choice for, if this character is really committed to, I need to be here for my family and I have to live with this, I don't think he's showing up to these things. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's fully in denial, trying to believe a delusion, ultimately knowing the truth, but like just going to convince himself to believe this so that he can try and live a normal life. You know, like I think I would have bought that a lot more, but ultimately something about like this continuing to haunt him, like he's unable to run from his guilt. He's unable to run from his conscience, I think would have been really fascinating too. So he's trying to buy this lie that he's told himself, but he can't. He ultimately, the human conscience will prevail.
And I think the attending the sentencing and the visiting the grave could have been useful if he ends up turning himself in. Like, yeah, those things are then meaningful because he knows that he shouldn't do this for his own sake and for his family's sake, but he has to do this. And I think that's where you would see that kernel of goodness and that principle of like sacrifice and justice and all of these, you know, really lofty ideas that we all love. I think those would make sense in that context. But for him to do those things clearly, well, maybe not clearly, but like beating himself up is how I read it. And yet he continues to do what I deem to be the wrong thing. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm not rooting for you. No. Like, I want Toni Collette to come in with all the police and come and take you away. I watched this movie wrong.
Well, my prediction was that he was going to, all up until the sentencing, or up until the verdict, he's going to vote not guilty because, he's going to vote guilty because he's prioritizing his family. There's a whole sequence with his wife beforehand, so like he's tugging on his heartstrings in that way. But I thought him going to the sentencing was going to be the thing that ultimately he could not turn away from. Like ultimately that would be the moment of the come to Jesus moment of like, I can't allow this, you know, and for him after the sentencing to ultimately come forward is what I would have expected from this character who maybe it's a more hopeful read of, you know, the goodness of human beings ultimately prevailing, but he doesn't even do that. So he's the literal worst. Like, even going to the sentencing, even going to her grave was not enough for his conscience to ultimately kick in and prevail. Like, it wasn't seeing this innocent man be sentenced to life in prison, knowing he was responsible, was not enough for this man. Like, wow. I would have given him a little bit more slack if he was really just trying to live a lie. Like, all right. If they did what I I think they did at the end of Hitman, which is like a kind of silly comparison between Juror number 2 and Hitman. But the way that those two were like, we didn't kill him. No, not at all. Not at all. I think that would have been easier to buy.
And I think another interesting version of this movie, I love that this episode so far has just been alternate versions of this same story.
Yeah.
But I think there's a version of this that happens after the sentencing, and he thinks that he can live this life, and we just watch it eat away at him. I mean, it's really Crime and Punishment, but here. I love Crime and Punishment. It's such a good book. And I think that could be really interesting. Again, it's that like, okay, moral dilemma. What do you do? And what do you prioritize? What is the upright thing to do in this situation? And an exploration of guilt and how it can eat away at you and absolutely destroy you. And I think with his history of alcoholism and all of that could be a really interesting play in that too. So I think there's another version of this that makes everything that we see in the movie much shorter, so we just get the gist of what happened. And then like the second half is him just living with his choice and watching it kind of destroy him, which again is a very dark version of this film. I feel like all of our versions are much darker than this, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. But Toni Collette is always going to be the hero, okay?
Always. Always.
And it's what's fascinating too is like her situation, it's very different. It's not the same. But the sacrifice that she makes with her career and her life's work to ultimately do the right thing is comparable, similar in nature, not the depths of it, of course, but similar in nature to a lot of the way that like Justin chooses to prioritize himself, his life, his family over this upholding the systems of justice that he's kind of twisted his definition of justice by the end of the film around. And I think that's a fascinating like opposite journey trajectory for these two characters that is also really interesting for them to be foils of each other, because we start out with honestly Toni Collette's character is a little bit of the politician that's just calculating for her benefit, and she throughout the film, I think, well, the sense that I get is that she knows and starts to have real strong suspicions that the defendant is not the killer, and she knows that she's convicting an innocent man, and you see that begin to eat away at her as well. And so the kind of similar in nature circumstances between Juror number 2 and Toni Collette's character as the DA, I think would have been really interesting to explore the ways that they handle the situations.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was just so interested in her, which I did not expect, especially as, you know, this politician prosecutor running for district attorney. Like that is not a character that I expected to really enjoy watching and in the end come to root for, but that is definitely the journey that I went on, and Toni Collette is the hero of this film, as she should be. She kills it.
Yes. Okay, another alternate version of this movie.
Ooh, yes.
is I wanted either J.K. Simmons or that other juror member that was onto Kemp.
Yes.
To just either team up, work together, I don't care what, but they smelt something funky, and I would have gotten sweet satisfaction from seeing them be the ones to also like crack this case. They don't show up again. They don't really explore those threads, but that would have also been a really fun time for me to see this like cat and mouse game between Kemp trying to like weasel his way out of this, but then this ex-police cop or this other incredibly just sharp jury member just figure it out. Would have been really satisfying.
Yeah, I loved everything that Cedric Yarborough did as Marcus. He was so good. And there's so many shots of this where Justin is in the foreground and you can see Marcus just watching him, and I was like, yes, I I'm here for it. I'm on Team Marcus, though I don't love the conclusions that he comes to of like, this dude is guilty. I'm always going to vote that he's guilty. I didn't love that. But everything else that Marcus did, I was here for. I was like, yes, you keep an eye on him because your BS meter is spot on. And you know that there's something wrong with this white man who is just out here acting all kinds of shady. I loved it. And I would also like to pitch a 8-episode limited series starring J.K. Simmons as
yes, please,
as a florist by day and a investigator by night, and it can have like cozy mystery vibes and will just be fun and lighthearted, and clearly he's good at his job because he dug up so much evidence in 0.2 seconds. I would like this series. I would like to see J.K. Simmons as a florist/investigator solving crimes in Georgia. I think it would be great.
He was so charming. Life Rose On.
It's so good.
That is the name of the show. Sign me up. I want merch with Life Rose On it.
Right?
I would like to rock that, please.
This is great.
Yes.
Come on, Warner Brothers. We're giving you ideas here.
Yeah. That's so
We
good.
want this show.
Oh, he was so great as this character. I haven't seen J.K. Simmons in something in a while, and it was wonderful to see him in this. And he's just, his time in this is too short. I thought he would boomerang back somehow, in some little way, with some little detail that he provides Toni Collette's character. Whatnot. I just thought that we'd see a little bit more of an appearance from him again, but alas, he made a big splash when he was on screen.
He did make a big splash. He was so great in this. He's always great though. But yeah, he has so much just presence on screen. And just the second that you see him, it's like, yes, J.K. Simmons is here. This is going to be great. The rest of the film could be mediocre, but you know that he is going to bring the good stuff. And that is exactly what he does in this film. It's him and Toni Collette just absolutely doing a great job and making their characters so much fun to watch.
Yeah. And I think that Nicholas Hoult is a great casting for this character. We just reviewed Nosferatu 2024, Robert Eggers' edition of the classic film, and Nicholas Hoult does an incredible job of playing this like incredibly earnest, good guy that's kind of not effective, but like you buy that he's trying to do the right thing. I just think that he didn't have well-written source material to be able to bring that to life, but I do think from a casting perspective, he is a great choice for this type of role. It doesn't work in the film that's written, but I think casting-wise, he does a great job. And this is based on our very recent experience of seeing him do a great job as Hutter in Nosferatu 2024.
Yeah, two very different types of films and different types of performances. I do love that we're reviewing these two films in the same month with very different flavors of Nicholas Hoult. And you see his range across those two films, that he can do a lot. And I think he does the best with what he's been given in this film. And there are moments where he is truly sympathetic and you feel bad for the guy because, man, he made some mistakes and he's just trying to do his best and improve his life and be there for his family. Like, get it. That's all relatable. And Nicholas Hoult does a good job of communicating all of those things. I was focused on all the wrong things in this movie, so I couldn't fully get there with the empathy.
Yeah. He does some great work, especially in those courtroom sequences with the nervousness, the eyes, and I wish that the realization that he is a part of this came later, so we could just wonder, like, man, he's just really nervous. Why is this very earnest man so nervous? Something's a little off here, and let us sit with observing him, just kind of tap his knee and flip his coin and fidget in his chair for a little longer. Like, let us just wonder a little longer, because Nicholas Hoult can deliver the curiosity around, like, this guy, he's got some tics here. Like, what is going on here? And he does a great job of it. Just more guessing. I would have wanted to do more guessing.
Yeah. And seeing him, like, normal and his baseline, And so then once he starts to have all of these little tics and he's sweating and he's fidgeting and all of these things, like that the contrast would be big enough that we'd be like, wait a second, this is not the person that we met. What is going on with this guy? And then we all become Marcus and we're all just watching him trying to figure out what's wrong with this dude. Yeah, that would have been so interesting. And would have really, I don't know, that would have kept me, I think, more engaged in this film rather than just a few minutes in. And it's like, oh, wait, you killed her? Oh, this is a very different movie than I signed up for. Okay, I guess we're doing this now.
Yep. Make us work for it. We want to guess.
Yes.
We want to wonder. We want to all the juicy, like, cat and mouse. Like, we think we know what's happening, but then we don't, you know? This is the movies. We don't want to know.
Well, and give us space to ask questions. Like, there was I was asking a lot of questions, but I don't think it was any of the questions that the film wanted me to ask. Because I was trying to be a lawyer in this movie, and that's not what the film wanted me to do. So I was focused on the wrong things. But have us asking the questions of what is wrong with him? What does he know? What did this case trigger in him? Like,
right. Did he know her?
Is he okay?
Yeah.
Like,
was Kendall an ex?
Have us asking these questions.
Yeah. Yes. Like, did old friends from long ago or something.
Yeah, because how small is this town? We don't know. So have us asking these questions and then little by little give us these breadcrumbs of answers so that we can start to put the picture together as opposed to just like, here's the case. And oh yeah, he was there and he killed her. Okay, let's do a movie. It's like, wait, what?
Well, the flashbacks where he realizes he was there happen literally during the jury selection process. It is like scene number 3 of this movie. You know what I mean? Like, it's immediate flashback. Like, oh, you're being selected, but you were the killer. And it's, we're at the 10-minute mark of the movie. Like, it's just way too soon. Way too soon. Make us work for it. Yeah.
We wanted a little mystery in our legal drama.
It's fun. Mysteries are fun.
It is fun. Mysteries are fun.
Okay, another thing that didn't work for me is the husband and wife chemistry. I think from scene 1, I was like, this feels like the emotional anchor of this movie, I think, working well. I'm assuming, knowing this moral dilemma, like, obviously he's torn because he has such emotional investment and loyalty and wanting to provide for his family, which makes all the sense. But I, throughout this film, knew that cognitively, did not feel that emotionally because I didn't buy their relationship. They don't have a lot of on-screen chemistry. So I think that's another factor that if that were stronger, maybe we would have like rooted for this protagonist a little bit more. And I think like the whole concept of the moral dilemma hinges on this other side of the weight of the scale being able to hold its weight against this other side, which is like your moral responsibility. Like that has to be balanced in a really interesting way for this to work well. So a great example of this is a film that was on our top 10 list this year and was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, Anatomy of a Fall. We mentioned it earlier, but that does a great job of balancing this tension of like, without spoiling too much of the movie, the mother feeling this internal tension between wanting to be able to not be convicted so that she can provide for her son, but then also figuring out how to navigate the moral responsibilities of her case, right? So I think that so much of the movie's emotional weight hinges on that relationship being strong from a performance perspective for us to buy into that. And I don't think that worked very well. At least didn't work for me.
Yeah, again, this is me asking all of the wrong questions. There are multiple scenes where he's in a room and she turns the lights out on him. And I wanted to know why she kept doing that. And the film opens with Justin being like the perfect husband. You know, he did the whole baby's room. And he didn't just like slap on a coat of paint. It is.
That's right.
Like,
I forgot about that.
it is
so
the
cheesy.
most beautiful baby room you will ever see. And then they have this party, and he's doing all of these things at the party, and he cleans up after the party, and he does the dishes. All good things. Yes, please treat your partners well. Like, be nice people. But like, it's so over the top right from the jump. And so that's some of that like manipulation that I was feeling from this film, is like, if you're starting me here with him as the perfect husband
by the end,
he did some shady stuff. And so there's really not, I guess the explanation is that he feels maybe guilty, or he's so grateful for his life now and her, and he's just like happy to serve her, and they had lost pregnancies before, and so this one is like really extra super duper emotional. Like, there are ways to maybe explain that behavior, but I don't know, man. I don't think the film did enough for me to fully buy it. So I just saw all of that as just movie manipulation.
It's cheesy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The other piece of it that I feel like maybe the film could have done more of, so that Justin had more maybe ammo to justify his actions, is focus more on what the defendant did wrong, and make the defendant out to be a worse dude than he actually was. And they do a little bit of it. You know, he has a tattoo that signifies, you know, drugs and things, but like, it's very loose and not super definitive. And so I think that there's probably a way that Justin could have been like, okay, I have my wife and my daughter, and I need to be there for them. And this dude had prior convictions, or, you know, like, he's involved in all of this other stuff, or make the defendant even less, I don't know. For me, I didn't like him, but he was sympathetic enough that I was like, well, he's not guilty. Like, he should go free. So make the defendant worse. Make him a rougher dude. And then that would give Justin maybe some of that feeling of, okay, morally, I can justify this because he's a bad dude. We would still need that wrestling within him, I think, but I think maybe that could have helped explain how he got to where he got to.
And I think that would also help the internal conflict for us as the viewers to be really interesting for us to sort through as well. You know, I think by the end of this film, he clearly does the bad thing, and it's a very definitive indictment of his choices. At least it's like clear to me. Like, I never felt like he was making like potentially like the right decision, or I never bought his whole manifesto that he gives to Tony Collette's character around like this twisted form of justice that he believes in. But an alternate version of this movie would have made that a much more viable, feasible view that we would have to sort through. Like, oh gosh, like, we kind of were rooting for him and like feeling like he was making the right choice, but like, what about our loyalties to the justice system and the right thing to do? And like, just like us at the end of the movie kind of discovering how much we've been also swayed by the emotions of his story, and that being an unbalanced picture, and us having to ultimately sort through that ourselves would have been really interesting to go through that journey like with this protagonist as well. Because by the end of this film, I didn't feel any like moral tension. I'm like, nope, he did the bad thing. Like, he made the wrong choice. But what if we also, weren't so clear at the end? What does that say about us and how quickly we can kind of root for the villain, root for the criminal? I mean, it's like what I love about mafia movies and gangster movies. It's like by the end of the movie, you're rooting for the bad guys. Cognitively know differently, but the magic of the movie being able to get us there says a lot about our ability to be swayed so quickly by the way characters portray to us. And that's so much of like the legal process too, and the legal stage. So I think that would have been a fascinating choice or alternate version of this movie, is to make that gap between this character that is good and we believe him to be good, and then this defendant that truly is kind of a difficult person to root for and to play, for us to have to like pretend we were in that scenario as well with our character as he's going through that, would have been really, really interesting.
I like that. I'm always fascinated by movies like that, mob movies, and I think some heist movies can also fit into that category where you're watching and you're like, man, I am rooting for some bad dudes, but like I'm rooting for them. And that's always so interesting to think about internally during and after those movies of like, wow, how do I organize my own morality and what is right and good? And how do I define that? And how did the movie manage to sway me in my own construction of justice? You know, I think those are so fascinating. And I think that's some of what this movie is trying to do. But for me, it just didn't quite get me there. So it was like, I could see what the film was trying to get me to do. And yet I couldn't get there emotionally, I think because of Justin's character, which is kind of wild, but it tried to get me there. But I think mob movies are usually more effective in getting me to this
right
thinking of morality. So I don't know, is that like, does that reflect more on us and who we are as people, that this really like earnest dude and we're just like, nah, give us a mob movie.
I'm like, nah, but Michael Corleone? Dang, like I will follow him into battle. Wow, he's terrible. Denzel, American Gangster, by all means. I'm like, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's why I'm curious to read more of the positive reviews of this film to see, like, maybe it's that moral tension that really did make this film really captivating for people, because clearly, like, something did not click for us, and maybe we just have, like, questionable moral standards, and that's why we root for the mafia and the heist people. This is great for us.
Mm-hmm.
No one can tell me they're not rooting for Danny Ocean, though, okay? Like, I'm going to call lies on you. I'm going to call BS.
Well, and so the great thing about Ocean's 11, other than everything about it, is that you know that Danny and Rusty and everybody on the crew, they are criminals and they're breaking the law, but they're likable. Yeah. And their cause is just, because the person that they are stealing from is filthy rich and he's a bad dude. And so the film does such a good job of contrasting our good guys who are criminals with this presumably law-abiding citizen who's also kind of shady. And so morally, we can make that balance because the film gives us the pieces to go along with this. And the crew is likable enough and fun enough, and they are in a twisted way doing good, so then it's okay that they're criminals. Mm-hmm. You know, like, and the film is so specific and strategic in giving all of those pieces early enough in the film so that we're okay with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Juror number 2 doesn't, at least not well enough for us, doesn't set it up so that we are really rooting for our protagonist.
Yeah, but, well, that's the problem. Is like, we're rooting for our protagonist, theoretically, but we also are rooting for the defendant. And like, then I don't know that I'm also torn of like who I'm rooting for and like who am I rooting against in the situation. My other alternate version of this movie is for it to follow kind of a similar like thesis that American Gangster does, which is that American Gangster focuses so much on this like very good cop in Russell Crowe and this corrupt drug lord in Denzel who's running the drug gang, but he's finding his form of survival in a difficult set of circumstances. And ultimately, the thesis of the movie, for those who haven't seen American Gangster, we're about to spoil the movie, but they together go after the corrupt cops that are the ultimate like corrupt part of the system, and the system is broken, therefore the individuals are suffering. And I think a similar scenario where there's seeds of it in this film as well, which is like the police went to that witness and gave them one photo zeroed on it, had tunnel vision. So it's J.K. Simmons' whole bit, you know, where he's like, the police don't have enough time to be able to investigate these thoroughly and well. So they get tunnel vision, they try and find their suspect, and they close the case quickly because they're pressured to do so. And that is what I see as the root source of why our protagonist, questionable morality by the end, but like our protagonist who is just purely accidental in a bad situation, and our defendant are both kind of victims of the corrupt system that is broken and needs to be reformed. And that's a very different form of movie. Maybe David Fincher can direct that movie that is gonna like have a better ending of like we've been able to solve the system better and reform it and heal it so that everything's better. But there's seeds of that in this movie as well, which aren't fully watered and explored. But that's another dynamic that's part of this, which I think is interesting.
I love that. Like, can we get our merry band of heroes together to fight the corrupt system? Yeah, I like it. I'm here for this. Let's go.
We get J.K. Simmons. We get Toni Collette. We get Juror number 2. We get Cedric Garber's character.
Yeah, let's throw Chris Messina in there too. Like, I mean, Avengers assemble in Georgia. Let's go.
The whole jury is like, we are now advocates for a just legal system, y'all.
Yes.
This is our mantle.
Honestly, I'm here for that.
We're ready to
I would
carry.
eat that up.
Oh. Okay. Any other big thoughts about Juror number 2? Any other big rewrites we want to submit in as candidates?
I don't think so. I think
we hit a lot of them.
I would like to give a shout out to my favorite line in this entire film.
I wonder if it's going to be my favorite line too. I'm so excited. What's yours?
Oh, I'm so pleased. This is going to be interesting. Okay, it is when Nellie, who is the old lady on the jury, says to Brody, "You're so stoned, dear." And I lost it. I was like, oh my gosh, Nellie, you're the MVP of this film. Yes, ma'am. Incredible. So I would also like to pitch a limited series, maybe a 6-episode series of just Nellie and Brody just hanging out, palling around time. Maybe it's not even a series. Maybe it's just a YouTube series, you know?
Yeah.
Just kind of like some like vlog action between them as they're just kind of hanging out and palling around Georgia. That would be so much fun.
They bake some cookies. They go down to the creek.
Yes.
Yeah. They catch some fireflies.
Oh, it'd be such a fun time.
It would be so sweet. Very earnest. Very ridiculous. I love it. I would watch that too.
Excellent.
My favorite line from this movie is when Brody, it's the first conversation that they have when they're voting, and everyone's like, guilty. He's like, yeah, guilty's cool. Yeah, down for that. I go, oh my goodness.
I face-palmed.
So funny.
So hard. I was just, I wanted to
yelling
reach
at your TV
through the screen and just shake him. I was like, no, what we're not doing is we are not sentencing a man to life in prison.
Right.
Just, yeah, it's cool, man.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Guilty's cool. Yeah, down for that.
No.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, this is a review and discussion of Juror number 2. You can find it available to stream on Max. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about Juror number 2. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at MoviesandUsPod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. This episode was edited by Melvin Benson from Cinematic Doctrine. Check out his show for more great movie conversations. And we have another podcast that's in the podcast family with Movies and Us. It's called TV and Us. And over on TV and Us, we are reviewing Severance Season 2. So there's much to discuss with Severance, and man, come join in the conversations on that show because there's lots of goodness there. We'll be back next week here in Movies and Us to discuss the film Anora. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see y'all again very soon.